Joining us right now is Congresswoman Jack, Texas. Glad to have you on the show. Things got a little funky. Talking about bring the funk on Capitol Hill. You, Congresswoman Summer Lee, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, you got these Republicans who are acting a fool, talking about, oh, how oppressed they are as white men, and the things have just been so rough, Congresswoman. They're having a difficult time in this world because the oppression that they're facing. And then you got these commentators out there saying, see, right there. Congresswoman Crockett, she's the problem. That's the problem with these Democrats. They keep using this woke language, and this is why they're going to keep losing.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I was watching commentary from the New Zealand Parliament, and there was a line that really caught me as they're having kind of this struggle as it relates to Indigenous people. And the line was, when you are accustomed to privilege, to then have to deal with equality makes you feel as if you are oppressed. And that line hit me so deep because that's exactly what it is. These are people that have enjoyed privilege their entire lives, whether they want to recognize it or not. And for literally everyone, because I kept saying, where's Byron? Where is Byron? Is Byron about to jump in this? Because I want to see what Byron has to say, because Byron served on the committee as well. But for some reason, Byron wasn't around to debate this particular bill being marked up. And the author of it, Representative Cloud out of Texas, was complaining that right now they are being oppressed. And then there was an issue with Higgins out of Louisiana, where he was arguing that he had been oppressed because Ayanna Pressley asked him to stop misusing the legacy of Martin Luther King and basically honor the wishes of Martin Luther King's family. And he said, see, y'all are trying to oppress me. You're trying to take away my First Amendment right. And it was just frustrating because they consistently use this language and they really don't understand what oppression is, or they want to pretend like they don't understand. And that's why I needed to make sure I reminded them of what Google has defined oppression as. And I'm sure any other reasonable dictionary defines oppression in a similar way. And they are not being oppressed. They are whining little men.
You mentioned New Zealand, of course, Parliament was temporarily shut down. This is what after Maori lawmakers performed a haka, a traditional dance demonstrating the community's anger over you talking about the treatment of indigenous people in that particular bill. Pull the audio up, y'all, real quick. Come on. Come on, I wish y'all break out in the haka on the floor of the House.
I don't necessarily see that happening, but there is this movement of the far right that we're experiencing right now where it's all about whitewashing. It's all about deleting. In fact, again, in that same scenario in New Zealand, they talked about the colonization. And one of the things that I wanted to make clear is that oppression looks like what my ancestors have endured, and they have nothing to reflect upon as it relates to their ancestors being oppressed in any way. If anything, they were the ones that were inflicting the oppression. At least their ancestors were. And that was why I wanted to remind them of that. But that's also why it's so dangerous that they want to delete Black history from our history books. Because if you don't know your history, then you're doomed to repeat it. And when you see the likes of, say, a Byron Donalds out there who wants to glorify things such as Jim Crow, it is important that they recognize that there are those Black folk like me, like Rep. Ayanna Pressley, like Rep. Summer Lee, that will not allow them to delete us and delete our pain out of history and then decide to move forward and inflict more pain.
This was a study done from researchers at Tufts University School of Arts and Sciences and Harvard Business School, where we're at a point now where whites believe that they are the victims of racism more often than Blacks. I talked about this in my book, White Fear, how the browning of America is making white folks lose their minds. I said in this book that we are living, I've been giving these speeches since 2009. And I was saying then, so the last 15 years I've been saying, we are living in this age of white minority resistance. We're living in this age where white Americans feel as if they are being discriminated against, they're being targeted, they're losing opportunities. So you got this DEI thing, you got all this sort of stuff like that. And they have created this hysteria that, oh my God, that their world is crumbling down. And what I keep, and then of course, then you got these Democrats we're spending too much time on identity politics. We're leaving these things behind. So you got Bernie Sanders, you got Chris Murphy, all these people. And what kills me is they act as if whiteness is not an identity. They act as if that's not real. And I sit here and so they're like, well, we need to get away from these things. And it's like, okay, and run to what? Because the reality is Donald Trump absolutely pressed the buttons of white identity. You look at the targeting of white men and males. Maleness is identity politics. And these white male Democrats, I'm like, I don't know what world they're living in where they can't see this, because for them, anything other than white is identity politics. But anything with them, oh, no, that's just politics.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. And it is important that we continue to make the record clear on who it is that's bringing this up. They continue to try to say it's the Democrats. We're not bringing this stuff up. Like, this was not a Democratic bill. This was a Republican bill that was being marked up. And I have every right to make sure that I challenge any bill that comes into my committee or any bill that comes on the floor. This wasn't us and something we initiated, but it is something that I felt very strongly about responding to and finishing, because it's just a bunch of games. And for those that are cowering and deciding that they are okay with towing the Republican line to where they are going to whitewash us, I have news for you. If you are a Democrat, it has been people of color that have held you down in your seat. That is for sure. Every single Democratic seat that you look at, 9 times out of 10, there is a person of color demographic that is holding that district down and making sure that it's Democratic. So, when you're out there and you're saying that you're going to represent your constituency, it's not just the people that look like you. It's your entire constituency. And I try to do that every day that I'm in the House. But the reality is that just seeking equity should not be a problem in the land of the free and the land of opportunity. Acknowledging that there were wrongs that were done to people like me, to the extent that, yes, I am sitting in Congress. And so, yes, I have made it further than I could say the average Black woman, specifically when it comes to politics, knowing that I'm only the 55th Black woman to ever swear into Congress. But that doesn't mean that there aren't obstacles that exist because of the kind of built-in systemic issues that we have. And you can't start to fix systems if you decide that you're going to ignore that there's a problem. If there's no problem, there's nothing to be fixed. So the fact that they are trying to roll back the hands of time, and they said that this was all because they wanted to make sure that the most qualified people are working in our federal government. And I applaud my coworkers, especially Melanie Stansbury, who made a very good point of pointing out that Donald Trump is definitely not concerned about qualifications when we look at the people that are being put into position. And I even made the point yesterday, and I said, I can't say that I agree with Senator Scott on anything. I can't say that I agree with Byron Donalds on anything, but I can tell you this. Those two black men are more qualified to serve in some capacity in the Trump administration than the random people that Trump has decided to empower. But one thing is different about them, and is that they're black. And that is what diversity, equity, and inclusion seeks to get rid of, is this idea that if it's white, then it's always right. But to absolutely say, we will at least give a look to somebody who is different. And what they failed to really talk about in that hearing is that diversity is defined the way in that particular bill in such a way that veterans are diverse, in such a way that it's including your sexual orientation, it's including your sex, it's including all these things. But it's not just race. It goes down to your religious background. It's talking about diversity as a whole. And they didn't want to talk about that. So there actually potentially will be a negative impact specifically on our veterans, because a lot of our agencies look at your service as a veteran, and they look at that, and that helps you out when it comes time to earn a position in the federal government. And now they don't even want to do that. And these are people that risk their lives to make sure that we can maintain freedom in this country.
Does it frustrate discussions are being held and white women are silent? Because the fact that the numbers don't lie.
They benefit them.
White women are the greatest beneficiary of affirmative action, of DEI, of diversity than anybody in America. No, white women. Yeah. When you look at contracts, they say MWBE. If you are a black woman, you go in the black category. If you are Latina, you go in the Latino category. That W should be WW, white women. They are silent. And these Republican white women, these Democratic white women, these independent white women, and they sitting here the ones making all the money from DEI, the corporate jobs, the CEOs, they ain't saying nothing. And that's I keep saying that, yo, they got to be called out. You got to be say, hey, Representative so-and-so, you going to get in this? Hey, Representative so-and-so, you know white women who have city, county, state, federal contracts. That's DEI. Why y'all silent?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I didn't have enough time, but that was one of the points that I was going to make, is that white women are the greatest beneficiaries of DEI. And so when you're talking about DEI hires, they always try to use it as a slur against black folk, to be perfectly honest. But the reality is that DEI is a lot deeper than that. That's why I went into all the categories that are classified as diverse. But white women, again, we're not engaged in this debate. This debate, everything that I can remember, and I haven't played it back, it was nothing but the white men on the Republican side that were arguing for this. Now, they all voted for it, for sure, but they did not get engaged in the debate whatsoever on their side of the aisle. Everyone of all backgrounds was engaged in this fight as it relates to the Democrats. You know, I really wish we would focus on the things that could actually bring us together in this country, and the things that would actually solve some of the issues that we really need. Unfortunately, I don't know if the American people just weren't aware or just didn't care, to the extent that we now ended up with a Trump trifecta, where we will end up with more of this in attempt to delete and misuse and water down the legacy of Martin Luther King, and use his words as reasoning and rationale for absolutely eviscerating his legacy. That's what we're dealing with right now, is a bunch of folk that were supported by white supremacists that have a white supremacist agenda, whether we're talking about the actions that they will bring forth in Project 2025 that we constantly try to warn people about, that people said, well, he said he ain't got nothing to do with that. As of now, I think at least 2 of his nominees were authors of Project 2025. So, I don't know why people ignored us or didn't want to believe us or what the case was, but it's time to buckle up.
So I'd love to get your perspective on this here, because this has sort of been getting on my damn nerves. Ever since the election, you've got your fellow Democrats, everybody's weighing in on why Vice President Kamala Harris lost and things like that. So this is journalist Matt Iglesias. He goes, because he was asked, somebody said, just once, I would love people who say these things to be specific about what exactly would mean to, quote, abandon identity politics. He goes, one salient example of identity politics that hurt Democrats recently was the decision in 2020 to make Kamala Harris the VP nominee, despite her poor electoral track record and unimpressive performance on the campaign trail, because Biden needed to pick a black woman. Now, I'm gonna show you this second tweet. This is Chris Murphy of Connecticut. He goes, of the 20 highest median income states, Democrats won 18 of them. Of the 20 lowest medium income states, Democrats won 3. Yes, race and gender play a big role in politics, but the hard truth is Democrats clearly aren't listening to the people we say we fight for. So I want to go back to the first one. That is what Matt Iglesias had to say. Here's what I find to be very interesting, Congresswoman, since Matt desires a salient example of identity politics. In 2008, there was a guy who ran for president. His name was Senator Barack Obama. In 2008, there was a guy who ran for president. His name was Senator Joe Biden. This is the same Senator Joe Biden who ran twice previously for president and failed miserably. He had, quote, go back to the tweet, he had a poor electoral track record. He was unimpressed. He did an unimpressive performance on the campaign trail. But in 2008, Obama secured the nomination. And do you know what all the talk was in D.C.? Obama's going to need to pick a white man who can talk to those Rust Belt white people. And so he needs to pick somebody who has serious foreign policy experience. So who does he pick? He picked old Joe, a white man. What's interesting is that Matt Iglesias acts as if Joe Biden was not unimpressive in running for president. Mm-hmm. Sure, he was reelected as a senator, Vice President Kamala Harris, but she was elected as a senator from California. But people actually said Obama needed to pick a white man. He picked a white man. But Matt, it's amazing how Matt and other Democrats act as if his white male identity politics, that didn't exist, that it was identity politics. And then Chris Murphy talks about these states, these low states, they're red states. Democrats, please show. Democrats passed the Affordable Care Act. Who has that helped more? Broke people in red states. Who has benefited more? White men in red states because of health care. When you look at the economic policies, that's helped those people in the red states. So I'm trying to understand, maybe you can help me, whether it's Murphy or Bernie Sanders and others, explain to me how we have to do better to working class people. Show me where the policies aren't helping them. They're not voting because of the policies. They're voting because of culture.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you ask people, tell me exactly which economic policy Trump proposed that most impresses you, they can't answer that question. And like I know, that I traveled the entire country. And so this wasn't about this. And I kept telling people, I remember the last church that I visited in Atlanta, Georgia, and I said, this is going to be a vibes election, because if you want policy, she's got it. If you want policy from him, he's got concepts of policies, or he's got Project 2025, but he doesn't have the policies. And the interesting point that you just made is that in those states where they are thriving economically, they are democratically run. So, like, yes, Louisiana is constantly having a problem. Mississippi, Alabama, and Republicans run everything. And they are the ones that are broke. They are the ones that are lacking in healthcare. And honestly, these blue states that people complain about are the ones that are carrying them on their back. So, listen, for everybody that wants to talk about states' rights, I thought that it was an interesting move that the governor in California decided to make, where he said, I'm going to call a special session. We going to keep our coins here because guess what? California got a lot of money. California contributes to take care of these other states that ain't got no people and consistently put people in based upon, oh, you know what? Well, we are the party of religion. No, y'all not. Have you seen the top of your ticket? Have you seen his nominees? I mean, he's got at least 3 people that he nominated that have sexual assault allegations in some way around them, including his own sexual misconduct situation. So no, don't preach to me about religion. And as I try to tell people all the time, if you religion, go to church, but don't try to find it in your politician, because that's not our job. And this is coming from somebody that is the child of a preacher. I will tell you that if I had to assess anything, it is our communication. People don't know what we're doing, number one. So, it's kind of like the fact that people felt as if Trump cared about them when it came down to the stimulus checks. They thought that that was Trump. That was a failure of communication on our part. The fact that people don't truly understand who has the power of the person, how these things work, that is a problem that we have on education. So we've got to do better. And we can't just come out at election time and try to educate people. We've got to consistently educate them. We've got to consistently call them out immediately when things happen. And we also have to say, when it is a culture war, let me redirect you, because they decided that they were going to distract you, and make sure that you're pointing that out. But listen, here's the deal. I consistently heard on the trail, well, he's a businessman and he's strong. Those are the 2 things people would say. They would tell us Democrats are weak, and they felt like he was strong and that he was going to fix whatever pain they were feeling economically because he's rich. He's a businessman. Well, this is a brand that he's been building way before he ever ran for the presidency. And so it is hard to overcome that, because he had a solid brand that people bought into, and they also believe that he's authentic. All the gaffes and nonsense that he was making, they were like, oh, at least we know what we're getting with him. He's real. They felt as if they did not know the vice president, because even though she had been elected and had a great track record, she only had 107 days to brand herself outside of being Joe's vice president. And so people don't understand how difficult it is to kind of overcome some of that. I did hope that with everything that he was doing, that people would say, and with him being very clear about where he was with Roe and that kind of stuff, that people would say, you know what, I got to get out and I got to vote against him. But a lot of people decided to stay at home. And it's unfortunate, because we all are about to feel the effects of that.
Absolutely. You ran for the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, lost to Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. That to me is a part of this. Communication is critically important. You're absolutely right. I said for 3 years on this, all 4 years, that the administration was doing a horrible communicating policy. They were passing things, not talking about it. Not only that, amazing work happening when it comes to criminal justice reform in the Department of Justice. I said to Karine Jean-Pierre directly, to the chief of staff of Biden, I said, how do y'all never even bring this stuff up from the White House podium? And so it was just crazy. And I really do hope that the House Democratic Caucus listens to you. And again, I get this is nothing. I got great respect for Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, but here's the reality: I've never been contacted by her office. Never. My whole deal is, if you're trying to communicate, stop only talking to MSNBC. You got to be everywhere. You got to be on cable news. You got to be on digital shows. You got to be on podcasts. You have to be in a constant messaging mode. And I said to the campaign, I said January to July should be education, information, education stage, enlightenment stage, informative stage, because folk don't know what you did. And you can't wait to the last minute and think a 30-second commercial actually going to do it. Real quick, questions from panel. I need short questions from each panelist. Kelly, you go first.
Sure. So we can talk about policy all day, right? And I've seen you on panels. I saw you at CBC. I saw you at Urban League and the like. And I absolutely adore you. Like, I watch all your clips and all those things. So this is my favorite
Question, Kelly.
for a second.
I got to get to that question, Kelly.
I know. Real quick. As far as even with Roland's shirt, it said, I already did my job, get somebody else to do it. That kind of vein of thinking. As a Black woman in this political space, how are you encouraging yourself to keep going? And what do you recommend for Black women such as myself who, frankly, we're tired? I feel like we did our job. What else you got for us? Get somebody else to do it. How do you encourage that line of thinking as well?
Yeah, so, Roland started this off by talking about the fact that I did run for DPCC chair. And this was really to stretch my caucus because the times are different. A lot of my colleagues said, they had committed to Debbie 2 months ago. 2 months ago, as I explained in my speech, because I took all the time to really talk about what I was doing, I was actually traversing the country and trying to do everything that I could to make sure I could save democracy. I had raised over $4 million for this caucus. The raised goal as freshman leadership representative was $500,000, so I raised 8 times as much money as required. I made sure I gave out close to $400,000 or more to frontliners or red to bluers, either directly for myself or I raised for them, and I gave the caucus approximately $200,000 myself. So I was not sleeping. I was working. I was not seeking a position. And I think that we do get into this rut sometimes, specifically within kind of the party structure, where it's like, well, let's just kind of keep doing what we've been doing versus kind of challenging ourselves to kind of think a little differently. I also did not know, going more so to your point, how much I really was willing to do. I needed to take some time after the election and reflect. And the vice president called me about 2 or 3 days after the election. And she did what she always does. As difficult as it was for me to get out of bed, she was the one that reminded me of why I do this work. I don't do this work for me. I do it for the people that I serve. And so while I think that it is important that Black women take our rest, we rejuvenate, and we decide how we want to move forward, I think that at the end of the day, we have been so loyal because we know that the stakes are just too high. We know that we want better for our families, and this is what it looks like. It looks like us doing the heavy lifting. But I definitely believe that we've got to take our rest. But when I look for inspiration, I think about the college girls that were texting me, DMing me, saying how much they look up to me, the itty bitty girls that for whatever reason know my name and show up in the Capitol. And I think it's never been about me. It's been about the future generations and really wanting more for them. But it's important that we get our rest and we decide how we want to move going forward. And I think it is going to be important that we harness our power collectively and make demands and say, if you want us to work for you, these are the things that we're going to need in return. because we will have to have some assurances before we go out and break our backs again.
Matt?
Yeah, so Congresswoman, you're incredible. It's amazing to see the work you've done. My question for you is, what is the most pressing legislative issue for you at the start of the new Congress? What are you, hitting the ground running on legislatively?
If I'm being real with you, I don't anticipate we're going to have too many legislative wins coming out of a Trump trifecta. I mean, we know that this has been the most unproductive Congress in the history of the Congress, and they only had one lever of control. It looks like the majority that the Republicans will have in the upcoming Congress is going to be even slimmer. So we're really going to be on defense. The things that we really need to get done are things such as the Farm Bill, because we're now 2 years behind. But I don't anticipate anything good for us. So at least I know SNAP benefits are safe so long as a Farm Bill has not gone through. But we definitely need to make sure that we're supporting our farmers so that they can hold on to their farms, so that we are not importing all of our food. That is a really big issue for me, considering that we have so many in this country that are already food insecure. Other than that, we're going to have, a few of our yearly must pass things. I am concerned about whether or not the government will shut down, because we know the last time that the government shut down, it was when Trump had the presidency. That will be devastating for us if he does shut us down. So for the most part, it's just a matter of playing defense. Obviously, if we were looking at Democrats being in control, repro would be at the top of the list. Voting rights would be at the top of the list. Criminal justice reform would be at the top of the list. I am hoping that in the lame duck, there is a letter that we're about to send to the president requesting that anyone who is currently incarcerated under the 18-to-1 disparity as it relates to crack cocaine, hoping that the president will commute those sentences so that those that are still sitting there under those disparities, that they could be recalculated to the 1-to-1. That is something that this AG, as it relates to his prosecutions, it was always 1-for-1. So we're hoping that we can do that and get some folk out of prison that have been sitting way too long, and reduce the sentences of others. We know the numbers. We worked with the Sentencing Commission to get the numbers. We know how many how many people would actually come home. So we are about to push it out, and we hope to get the support of the president. I did have an opportunity to sit down with the Attorney General sometime before the election to talk about this being something that I really wanted to push for in the lame duck. So that's really kind of like my one big Hail Mary that I'm trying to make sure we can throw. But that's obviously before January. Come January, it's just going to be defense.
Michael.
Representative Jasmine Crockett, could you please explain briefly what the Dismantle DEI bill of 2024 is? Because according to USA Today, if it became law, it would effectively close all federal DEI offices and eliminate federal DEI programs. We know that's part of Project 2025. Also, how are these white men on the committee defining the term woke? I hear them use the term woke, but they never define it. Thank you. Yeah. And great job in the committee educating them.
Thank you. They definitely don't have a definition of woke. As far as I'm concerned, if it's the opposite of what they want, then they consider it woke. As it relates to the bill, you're absolutely right. So when we start to talk about programs within various schools, whether it's, I was looking at a portion of the bill that talked about kind of how they're encouraging in the healthcare space there to be more diversity. And we obviously already are in a great shortage as it relates to healthcare because of COVID-19. It would remove all funding that would help those that are historically disadvantaged from being able to get funds that would help them to potentially, be able to pursue their education. There was an amendment that specifically was put in by Rep Pressley that was specifically put in to make sure that HBCUs would not be defunded under this. Oddly enough, it did pass unanimously. So that was thrown in there because theoretically that could happen. Also, there's a provision that prevents someone who's been in any of these offices from transferring to another office. So if you ever worked in a diversity, equity, and inclusion office, then you would be prevented from transferring to another governmental kind of agency. Usually, if something gets shut down, then you have protections that allow you to go and transfer somewhere else. But basically, any funding that in any way is attempting to increase diversity in the federal government, it would be gone, as well as any positions, as well as the data showing us, this is how many, I want to say it was the FBI, how they now have to report the encounters, right, or at least keep track of the encounters and things like that. It will get rid of all of that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then. Well, Congresswoman Crockett, listen, Thanksgiving is coming up. Get some rest. Enjoy the fam. And then, of course, got Christmas happening December. There's work that still can be done. And you're right, come January 20th, we are going to be in a state of war, battling folks who want to dismantle everything. And what I keep telling people, look, focus on that, build locally, and then also focus on 2026, because you can stop that nonsense in 2026 by voting the right way. So get rest, but also we got to stay focused and get to work. Absolutely. Good to see you. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free to download, free to use, next generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you help build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on StartEngine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.
Black women on the House Oversight panel have been given the heat, talking about DEI, Republicans doing their usual nonsense. Well, here's Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley giving her 5 cents in 5 minutes. Of course, Summer Lee and Jasmine Crockett did the same yesterday. We wanted to show you what Pressley had to say. Check this out.
This bill, titled the Dismantling DEI Act, is an utter disgrace. Having sat and read the text in preparation for today's markup, I have yet another example to tell my constituents about the unserious work of the Republican Party. Now, I'll work with anyone serious about progress who wants to center the people who call this country home. This isn't it. The Committee on Oversight has the broadest jurisdiction in the entire House of Representatives to investigate any topic it chooses, but we are debating legislation that denies the sky is blue, water is wet, and racism is real. The major provision of the bill says to ban anything that acknowledges racism. And a few pages later in the exact same bill, there are multiple provisions discussing the presence of racism. This Republican approach is as predictable as it is nonsensical. On one hand, they're saying that racism does not exist. On the other hand, they are saying there is rampant reverse racism. Well, how do you reverse something that never existed in the first place? Riddle me that. While this Republican policy may have a new name, it's the same old tired game. Look, y'all are entitled to your opinions, but not a denial of the facts. Do you all know your history? Do you know American history? The original Constitution counted enslaved individuals as 3/5 of a person. During World War II, the federal government forcibly relocated and incarcerated 110,000 Japanese Americans. The FHA practiced redlining in the 1930s and 60s to deny mortgages to Black Americans, which is why we have a racial wealth gap today. I could go on. The GI Bill, which is supposed to be race neutral, denied access to Black Americans, denying them equal access to education and housing benefits, which is why we do not have generational wealth. Don't talk to me about merit when those Black servicemen fought for our freedoms. And I'd also just like to take a personal note of privilege to say, please keep Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s name out of your mouths. Yes. Your perversion of his words and his mission when his children have asked you to stop invoking his name and perverting his work when he was a proud and unapologetic Black man fighting for equality for Black Americans and all marginalized people. So you all are entitled to your opinions, but not a denial of the facts. But I'm not surprised that you would deny American history. What I am, though, is committed. Committed to speaking truth to power, committed to standing up for marginalized communities and vulnerable people, committed to ensuring that everyone has equal opportunity to buy a house, to work a job, to pursue higher education, and to live in a society that is fair and just. A colleague across the aisle invoked the phrase of, we must do everything to stop government-sponsored oppression. Well, I've just enumerated numerous examples, which is exactly why we have legislation and an executive order to reverse this harm. And that is why I'm committed to opposing this bill and urge my colleagues to do the same.
Look, what we are seeing here, Joy, and when I talk about these programs, you're already seeing it. But they're the victims. These white men are so oppressed. These white men, we can't get jobs. It is so nonsensical. But here's the other thing. The people who are so pathetic, which is one of the reasons why Vice President Kamala Harris is not president, white women. White women are the greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action and DEI in this country. Yeah. There are white folks walking around today whose mamas and aunts and sisters and cousins who have got grandmamas who've gotten contracts and built businesses off of MWBE. And what people don't understand is if you are a Black woman, they don't count you in the women category. You're counted in the Black category. If you are Latina, you're not counted in the women category. You counted in the Latino Hispanic category. And so that's just a fact. And so it's amazing to me to listen to these white folks. Then they get mad. They're on social media calling Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Oh, my God, she's so ghetto. She's so ghetto. And how dare she? I saw it was, I think, Jonah Goldberg or someone else said, oh, see, this is the problem right here. This is why Democrats lost. You know, people like this. And maybe it wasn't someone else, but they were complaining about it. And I'm sitting there going, oh, so y'all mad that Black folk are calling y'all out on your sheer stupidity. That's literally what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, what we love about Jasmine Crockett, what we love about Congresswoman Pressley is they're telling the truth. Look, the fact of the matter is there are white men out there who can't get jobs, right? We know that salaries have been reducing for American workers over decades. This is why we had an agenda with the Biden-Harris and then hopefully the Harris-Walz administration that would have been working to solve those problems, to restore the American dream. But people's ignorance, their cult following, their, let's face it, racism and misogyny cheated them out of a future in which we all could have shared. We could have seen improvements. Democrats have made mistakes. You're not going to see me defend any of them on tonight. But the fact of the matter is the American people backed the wrong horse. These folks do not care about them. And I don't want to make it just about African Americans because the fact of the matter is a lot of white people and a lot of women, white women, benefit from these programs. But that's not the narrative we have told. And oftentimes we've made.
Hold on, Joy. Let's be real. Joy. Hold on, Joy. No, Joy. We got to be real factual. We got to be factual. Not a lot of white women. When it comes to any MWBE program, the group that has the largest share is the women category, and that category should be WW for white women. You show me construction, you show me any city and state, I'm going to show you where women are getting the most contracts, and that's white women. So when they talk about DEI, DEI ain't nothing but yesterday's global diversity officer. And before that, it was, again, affirmative action programs. DEI ain't nothing but the grandson, the granddaughter of affirmative action. And white women have benefited from DEI. White women in corporate America. White women in law firms. White women in the medical field, in the dental field. And when it comes to these attacks, these white women are silent.
Worse, they're not just silent, they're actually voting with the other side. I wish they were silent. It's worse than that. I think that for many of them, they've cast their lots with white men. Some of the things that work in the gender space, a lot of lies that we tell are that, your proximity won't save you. But the fact of the matter is proximity has saved a lot of white women. So they got the saving of the rest of us who fought for equity programs, right? Got them to where they're almost 50% of the workforce, and some workforces even higher than that. They've been the beneficiary of all the DEI and affirmative action. And now they are willing to sink it for the rest of us when it's no longer convenient for them. They are simply not the allies that we wanted them to be. Maybe we didn't even think they were, but they're never going to be the allies that we need them to be. And that's why I won't be walking in the Women's March. And I know many other Black women feel the same, because we just have not seen that level of engagement with them, that level of reciprocity. They took everything and they gave almost nothing back.
Well, and I think, listen, all of those speeches, Lauren, were great, but I really wish Congresswomen Crockett, Summer Lee, and Ayanna Pressley had turned to every white woman on the committee and say, are you going to speak up? Because women like y'all have benefited from DEI. Y'all are the beneficiaries of DEI. See, I think what has happened, Lauren, is that when it comes to programs like this, we've let white women off the hook. Typically, it's Black folks who are defending these programs. Nah. We got to call that thing a thing and say, y'all have been benefiting. It's white women walking around who go, we don't benefit from affirmative action. Oh, yes, you do. And so it's time to put folk on Front Street, Lauren.
Well, when it comes to Black leadership and Black politics, and some might call it Black misleadership, what we see so often is that we are advocating for a lot of other groups and a lot of other people. We are not really calling out white women, as you just said. We then see press releases from various Black organizations and historic Black civil rights organizations talking about almost every other group except the one that organization says it stands for, African Americans. I can remember a few years ago, I think it was the Urban League that put out a press release with regard to immigration, the Dreamers. Certainly, we've seen several press releases from the NAACP for various other groups, LGBT, et cetera, and so on. And that's all fine if the streets are paved with gold in Black communities and everything's perfect in our communities, but it isn't. And when you're only 13 and 14% of the population, it's really important that your leadership is laser focused on some of the bigger issues that you are dealing with. And obviously, we talk about any sort of opportunity. When we talk about DEI, opportunities for jobs and wealth building, it's really important in the Black community the leadership stay focused on that, because that wealth building piece was dismantled, obviously. during our first 300 years in this experience of being in the United States. So knowing all of that, the leadership has to be very focused, whether it's the Congressional Black Caucus, whether it's the NAACP, whether it's the Urban League, or anybody else. And it's very hard to find in a world of corporate control leadership that is brave enough to sort of wave off that corporate control and do what is right for the constituency that you're representing. That is a piece that is not working right now with regard to leadership in the Black community. And I think there has to be a major reset with a lot of these groups and I think some members of Congress when it comes to, the question of allyship, because we really have no allies. We don't have a lot of groups that come to us and say, we'll help you out with this thing and we'll put out press releases and we'll make statements and our leaders will center your problems and your experiences. Our groups do that for other groups, but we don't see it the other way around quite often. So that has been a huge problem that needs to be fixed.
See, Derek, when I talk about putting folk on Front Street, this is how I look at it. Man, maybe I'm just a little bit too radical on this whole thing. So you're in the Georgia legislature. I would sit here and I would go, how many white women in this body have companies that do businesses with the city, the county, school board, or state? And I would sit here and say, Representative so-and-so, you against DEI? Well, that's interesting because you should get contracts because you're a woman. That's DEI. So-and-so, oh, you got $6 million in contracts from this year, from your business. Oh, you are the beneficiary of DEI dollars. You did DEI. When I was at Texas A&M there, I gave it was a speech communications class and we had to give a presentation. So I picked affirmative action. And this is what I said. I was the only, I think maybe it was one of the Black person in the class. And so I said, how many of you in this class, your mothers own businesses? And hands went up. And I said, how many of your mothers, to your knowledge, have received city, county, state, federal contracts? Hands went up. I said, congratulations. Affirmative action is paying for your college. Man, these white folks, they were aghast. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. Your mamas are benefiting from affirmative action. Your mamas are getting contracts. They had never had somebody tell them it. See, this is just the moment, as far as I'm concerned, where you got to call folk out and say, yes, you are. Maybe we should use the phrase, I just say DEI dollars, bowling for DEI dollars. Oh, you got some DEI dollars? You got some DEI dollars? Oh, you got some DEI dollars. And then use placards and call them out. And then also call out all these women's groups. I would, matter of fact, I think somebody should, one of these conservative women's groups, go pull a roster and see how many of them have businesses and how do they get contracts and go, man, look at y'all with those DEI dollars. Mm-hmm. To me, that's how you got to fight and call these folk out.
You know, Roland, I think all of Trump hires are DEI hires. They're all white men, right? I do agree that we need to call them out. Because here's the thing though, Roland, and I know you here in Atlanta with us, they don't use the term DEI for them. They use the word legacy, Roland. Your legacy. So you go to Harvard for free because of legacy. You go to Yale for free, your legacy. They don't use the same vernacular. Listen, since last year, Roland, over 30 states have implemented some form of DEI law to either restrict any form of DEI, 30 states. So what do you think is going to happen come January? In fact, 2 days ago, Roland, Trump used the word reparation. He gonna give 3 million white men reparations. He said that's their reparation for those blacks who went to HBCUs. So we do need to call them out, but it requires political courage. Roland, you know as well as I'm in Georgia, the largest black caucus in the United States. What will we do in this manner to do exactly what you just called for us to do? Call folks out, call some of my colleagues who are white women and say, you are receiving dollars. They won't do that, Roland. You know that, and I know that, because they don't want to exercise political courage to get that done.
Well, again, I just think that if you want to expose people for their hypocrisy, you got to call them by name. You got to name check them. You got to expose them, and you got to say, "Oh, look at Miss DEI dollars. Oh, she hates DEI, but she gets contracts because she's a woman." Baby, that's called good old affirmative action. I'm just saying that's what maybe should be done.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free to download, free to use, next generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you help build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on StartEngine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.
Things got heated on Capitol Hill. Y'all, they were dealing with the issue of DEI. And let me tell you something. Two of the black women on this panel were not having any of it. First up, here is Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas, bringing the funk.
So many of you know that I practice law, but some of you don't realize that I actually was a business major out of Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. And the emphasis that I got in my business degree was on finance. And as I traveled the country campaigning this election cycle, one of the things that I talked about was this idea that in finance, we always promote this idea of diversity. If you know anything about a portfolio, the one thing that you want to do is make sure that it's as diverse as possible, because at times certain stocks will perform better than others, and they will exemplify various strengths and weaknesses. And together, a diverse portfolio is usually what any good finance person would promote. They wouldn't promote that you solely invest in vanilla wafers, believing that that is going to be the strongest portfolio, but instead they may want to add some chocolate cake and some Twinkies into the mix to make sure that we have the best portfolio, because there will be different preferences by different people. And again, there will be different strengths. But as I sit here and I think about what we say and what I'm hearing as it relates to diversity when it comes to anything outside of making money. And to be clear, we are losing GDP every time we try to push back on this idea of diversity, because all of us bring something different to the table. But you consistently said over and over the word oppression, and every time that you said it, it was almost as if I was hearing nails on a chalkboard, because it seems like you don't understand the definition of oppression. And I'd ask you to just refer to Google to help you out. Oppression is the prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control. That is the definition of oppression. And so as I sit here as a black woman who practiced civil rights, let me tell you, the reason that my colleagues wanted to make sure you understood the same black history that your your side of the aisle wants to delete out of classrooms is because you can then misuse words like oppression. There has been no oppression for the white man in this country. You tell me which white men were dragged out of their homes. You tell me which one of them got dragged all the way across an ocean and told that you are going to go and work. We are going to steal your wives. We are going to rape your wives. That didn't happen. That is oppression. We didn't ask to be here. We're not the same migrants that y'all constantly come up against. We didn't run away from home. We were stolen. So yeah, we are going to sit here and be offended when you want to sit here and act like, and don't let it escape you that it is white men on this side of the aisle telling us, people of color on this side of the aisle, that y'all are the ones being oppressed, that y'all are the ones that are being harmed. That's not the definition of oppression. You tell me the prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment that you've had, and we can have a conversation.
You could start with Exodus.
The final thing that I will say on this particular issue, two things. There is an article from The Guardian, and it is a little old. It's from 2021, so I apologize. But it said that back then, just 3 years ago, white men represent 30% of the population, but 62% of office holders. These are the issues that we are constantly looking at and recognizing and trying to say, is this just? I can't even tell you how many white men have served in this chamber, but I can tell you that I am only the 55th black woman to be elected to Congress. And so when you want to talk about history and pretend as if it was so long ago, it wasn't. Because again, I am just number 55. Finally, when we start to talk about what do these numbers do as we're trying to say that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the problem, the reality is that when it comes to financial performance, companies with more diverse workforces are more likely to outperform their competitors. Companies in the top quartile for racial diversity are 35% more likely to outperform their peers on profitability. Companies with diverse executive teams are 25% more likely to generate greater profits. Diverse companies earn 2.5 times higher cash flow per employee. Diversity works. And until you can show me data that says otherwise, I think that we need to go back to being a country that listens to experts and gets out of our feelings and recognizes, again, that racism is real in this country. And until we stop pretending that it's not, we will not solve the problems that we are consistently facing. And that will bring real unity that we seek when we're looking for a more perfect union.
Ooh, Congresswoman Summer Lee, she said, I want some of that.
I'm not in favor of the Dismantle Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Act, or what it maybe would more aptly be called the dismantling any semblance of support or opportunity for certain American acts. We know who those Americans are. Americans who have not enjoyed centuries of unfair advantages by keeping others enslaved or segregated or disenfranchised or incarcerated or redlined or gerrymandered or excluded by law. Americans who've lived with disabilities or had their relationships criminalized or their gender expression demonized. If we're being honest here, this bill, which will wipe out every diversity, equity, and inclusion program in our federal agencies, plus those who contract with us, plus those who receive grant money, plus our schools, is nothing new. This is just the final piece of a decades-long obsession with targeting and dismantling anything that might give marginalized people a fair shot, including DEI programs, which honestly started the second the Civil Rights Act passed. Policies like affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion are the closest things we've had to the mythical bootstraps that some of my colleagues insist historically and currently harmed communities need to pick themselves up by. After centuries of efforts to keep us out of schools and universities, from jobs and elected office, Republicans targeting these policies are no accident. Why do predominantly conservative white men believe that the success of a black person or the opportunity or access of a black person is an existential threat to them? DEI is not given any unfair advantage that society itself does not already confer on certain Americans. It merely exists to ensure that all other people, that women, minoritized folks, queer folks, disabled folks, have the same opportunities to succeed and thrive in our workforce and our schools as people who have not had those opportunities systematically and legally stripped from them do. Is our country not greater when all of us have opportunities to succeed and contribute and survive? Our success and our survival as a nation is bound together. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs only exist to band-aid over decades, hell, centuries of discrimination against people's skin color, their religion, disabilities, gender, or sexual orientations, you name it. Contrary to Republican conjecture, remedying past discrimination is not, in turn, a discrimination. And we're not going to sit here and pretend racism is over just because one black person on the Supreme Court agreed that it should be. What DEI does not do is give some kind of magical pass to better jobs, like some of our colleagues are implying. That middle word, equity, does not mean more than or better than. It means treating people fairly and impartially. It means working to fix generational and systemic discrimination to the betterment of all of us and all of our institutions. But instead, Republicans are trying to bastardize the term DEI to be a slur. When Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was up for confirmation and when Vice President Harris was added to the ticket, they called them DEI hires. They want you to believe that a Harvard graduate with over 20 years of experience, who happens to be a black woman, is not qualified, but a Fox News personality is qualified to run the Department of Defense, and the WWE executive is qualified to run the Department of Education. Let's be real. There is an attempt to create a direct correlation between our race, being a black person, and our qualifications. So much as to say that there is no way to be a black woman. There is no resume that a black person could have that would qualify them unless that black person is a Republican. And there is a quota there. And while all of this has happened at the top level of our government, I can promise you these same things are happening on every single level of government and private sector. But those people don't have a national platform to speak out against discriminatory treatment. Where is a federal worker supposed to turn when another coworker says a racist comment to them in the break room? Where is the same-sex couple who is denied housing supposed to, because of their relationship, supposed to turn? Where is a pregnant woman who was fired for being pregnant supposed to go? Often the only place that they have to give them recourse are the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. These folks just want to do their jobs, serving the American people in an environment that feels safe and supports them. Making work a better, safer environment for some does not mean it automatically is worse for others. And those complaining about DEI training are probably the ones who need it the most. My Republican colleagues have got to stop punching down on already marginalized communities and face their own fears of a level playing field privately. It's shameful. I yield back.
See, that's what I'm talking about, Daniel. Why you gotta have black representation in the room.
Let me tell you something, man. I wish them sisters had a campaign donation button up when they were speaking. We have to stand up when we see people not just speaking truth to power, but, you know, we cannot continue to allow the types of things that are happening to continue without being vocal. And I think one thing about this group, this platform I'm sharing with you all and with our other speakers is we're seeing this happening in real time. And there was a time in my generation, I'm 45. There was a time in my generation that a lot of us were like, we don't see how they could have did this in 1968, or they wouldn't have hit me like this when I was crossing the Edmund-Pettus. This is our 1968. This is our time to not just sit in the corner idly by. We have too many brilliant minds coming out of Howard and Clark, Atlanta, Morehouse, Spelman, Florida A&M. We can no longer stand idly by while they are doing these things under the threat that they're just going to happen. So I actually am not only proud of what those sisters said, I'm not only proud of how they stood there, but I hope they inspired people around them to do the same. Because as you heard the second sister, Ms. Summer Lee, when she mentioned about the qualifications, we're acting as if we haven't been disrespected in the sense of being overqualified. Heck, Michelle Obama was the most decorated, educated, degree-having first lady in the history of our country, yet and still there were questions about her qualifications as a first lady. So when we see these things happening to Vice President Harris or to our sister that sits on the Supreme Court, Justice Brown, we have to step up and stop allowing them to dumb it down and accept it as if it's normal.
Given.
Yeah, look, Roland, I mean, the past few weeks have been really hard for a lot of Democrats, including myself. But, hearing these clips, I feel a lot of hope about the future of our party because of young leaders like Congresswoman Lee and Congresswoman Crockett. And if I could speak just about Jasmine Crockett for a minute, no one says it quite like she does. I think she's one of the most effective communicators and messengers that we have in the entire Democratic Party. I'm really excited that a lot of people got to know her and got to see her and hear her during this campaign cycle at the DNC, where I was on the speechwriting team, as you know, Roland, and on this very show. I remember, Roland, on the first day of early voting in Texas, you did an interview with her. And so platforms like these, so important, right, for making sure the American people, including those in our community, know about those leaders who are in these spaces and in these rooms, speaking up about the issues that matter most to our community. I think it's also important to underscore that, Congresswomen Lee, Crockett, and, all those who are in our Congressional Black Caucus, they're not just speaking up about these issues. They're speaking up about the issues that matter most to the American people, whether it's the cost of food, the cost of housing, healthcare access, reproductive freedom. They're on the front lines for so many of these issues that directly impact our communities. And of course, DEI and the attacks that we're seeing are included in that. But our leaders are on the front lines, making sure that our country moves forward on so many issues. And I think with these clips, we're reminded of just how fortunate our community is, and in fact, the American people are, to have representatives, true representatives like Jasmine Crockett and Summer Lee, who are standing up for our community and for the people and against these attacks that MAGA Republicans, again, it's their side that's bringing these attacks, that are talking about DEI and all of this. They're the ones who are bringing these attacks, and there are going to be a lot of them over the next 4 years. But I'm so grateful and I'm excited that we have representatives like Summer Lee and Jasmine Crockett. And I know Jasmine Crockett ran for DPCC chair earlier this week. That's the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. She didn't win, but I'm really excited to see how she and Congresswoman Lee continue to lead and to rise within this party.
Scott, there are a lot of people, obviously, who are frustrated, they're sad, they are angry, people talking about giving up, all sorts of stuff like that. And I've had people tell me, I don't understand how you just moved on. I said, well, first of all, I didn't just move on. I said, I know what happened. I said, but what I also realize is there is a tomorrow. And you're looking at two individuals. Republicans right now control the House. They're going to control the Senate. They're going to control the White House after January 20th. And I just got to remind people that there were days when Oscar DePriest, when Ralph Metcalf, when John Conyers,
that's right,
when you had black folks who were in Congress, and they had Adam Clayton Powell, and they were dealing with just straight up hardcore violent racist, and they went to work every day.
Right.
They went to work every day in the face of Jim Crow segregation. And I think what this generation has to understand is it's now your time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you can either give up, be despondent, be sad, go into a state of depression, or you can fight. And for me, I'm not going to do that bullshit Joe and Mika did. Just go to Mar-a-Lago and let's do a reset. Hell no. My studio is 2 blocks from the White House. I have absolutely no intention on going to the White House for the next 4 years after January 20th. I'm not going to normalize this administration. I'm not going to sit here and play footsie with this administration. But I need folk to understand that, damn it, there is still a fight to be had, because there is still a tomorrow that we must focus on. And that's what these two sisters are doing.
Yeah. Roland, I talk to juries for a living.
at least 3 or 4 times a year. And so when I hear the sisters talk, I'm listening not just for cadence, but substance, eloquence, articulation, and discipline, and no emotion, right? And what bothers me most about those 2 presentations aren't the presentations, but how eloquently they laid out the hypocrisy. And what bothers me is that the hypocrisy that is so clear in the both sides of this issue, why it's not resonating with the majority of Americans. That why don't they get it? Or if they get it, they just ignore it. And I'm not talking about just Republicans. I'm talking about independents and Democrats as well. Why 50% of America voted for Donald Trump and are endorsing these appointments that are nothing less than embarrassing. I think you're right about, I think about the brothers and sisters, our parents, our grandparents, who fought in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? What character or manner of men they were to fight against outright segregation and racial oppression and the Night Riders. I think about your parents who not only on the picket line, but were registering people to vote for the last 30, 40, 50 years, or my dad and Reverend Singleton and Joliet, Illinois, who were foot soldiers for Martin Luther King, and in the face desegregating education institutions, hospitals, and the government. Let me tell you something. Those were the real freedom fighters. We seem like we don't want to fight that much, or there's not that much to fight about. But my father on his deathbed said, we've seen Trump before. We've seen him worse. He talked about Governor Wallace and Bull Connor in Philadelphia. He said, y'all crazy about Trump, but let me tell you something. We've been fighting this same stuff for the last 30, 40, 50 years, or 200 years, if you will. So to the young people and to my generation, load up. We got to ride out. You may not like the fight. You may think that we've gotten past that. But as Professor Glaude says, America's got to face the racism and sexism, misogyny and xenophobia that it is. Not who it wants it to be, not who America wants to be, but who it is. Because this last election showed us who America still is as we try to form this more perfect union. There's a ton more work to do. And we can't do it by ourselves. So you're right. You can be depressed for a day or two, but in the end, you got to get up and get back in the fight, because the fight is real. It's not going away, and it's not going to change. We're not going to win unless it's up to us, unless we do it. And so we all have that responsibility.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free-to-download, free-to-use, next-generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you helped build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on StartEngine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early-stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.
MSNBC's Morning Joe co-hosts Joe Scarborough and Amika Brzezinski, two of Trump's fiercest critics in the media, told their viewers Monday they had a face-to-face meeting last week with the convicted felon at Mar-a-Lago. They said it was an important opportunity for those who disagree to speak with each other.
Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different, and that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
Viewers voiced their disgust on social media, saying the host only met with Trump to avoid being targeted for disagreeing with him. We should also note that Trump was a man who said he knew nothing about Project 2025, for example, but also recently appointed Brendan Carr, chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. He wrote Project 2025's chapter on the FCC. Joy, I bring up that last point because in the work that you do in the spaces that you occupy, I know you're all about coalition building and talking to people who have diverse opinions. You can kind of build something together. But there's a difference between talking with somebody of a different political perspective versus somebody who is an outright liar and platforming him. You know, in the book on Tyranny by Tim Snyder, he talks about one of the challenges when a dictator comes into power is that the media acquiesces in advance, that people acquiesce in advance because they're afraid of basically the smoke. Am I off on this as somebody who's out there in those streets, as somebody who works to build coalition and talk to people of different opinions? Am I missing something here?
No, I found out about this when the team sent it to me that we were going to discuss it today, because I've long since stopped watching cable news because of, one, the 24-hour act as if we can't talk about any other story but these three things that happens on cable news, but also these types of things. And what it read like to me, just watching what played before me, it seems like this PR campaign that's being instituted. Don't believe anything that you've heard, even if you heard it from directly my mouth. I'm going to be a kinder, gentler, Trump in this administration. And it seems that is the talking point that a lot of people are running with and are attempting to get in good favor so that they are not shut out. When the bottom line is that people are trying to maintain the eyeballs and therefore maintain their dollars and cents, and making sure that they are not completely shut out from engaging in this administration that would boost their numbers back up since it has been dwindling. So I am not falling for the banana in the tailpipe. I am not falling for the kinder, gentler. I am going to believe a person who stood on stages, who stands before for us on a regular basis, whether that's through his social, through his words, through his actions, and tells you exactly who he is. And so he can say all the live long day that he's not familiar with Project 2025, probably because he doesn't read. However, what is clear is that those who came up with it are familiar with him, and they are familiar enough to seek power and be in charge of institutions that they are deliberately wanting to be appointed to in order to destroy. So I would say to folks, and I've said to my membership and I say to others, believe people when they tell you who they are. And out of his own mouth, he has repeatedly told us that. And certainly other people who have clear agendas of dismantling a number of our democratic institutions, they know who he is and know how they can move their agendas forward. And that's what we need to pay attention to, not the PR stunt and the PR campaign, and for other people who are concerned about their own pockets and not the American people.
Yes. And Julian, one of the things I find interesting is that they talk about, and look, in my work, in the work that I do in my DEI spaces, my whole thing is about finding common ground, but it's about people who want to actually find the common ground. When I see these conversations about we need to learn how to talk to each other and so on and so forth, these guys have no interest in talking to us. It's always a matter of us having to go to them. And so when I look at this looks at a situation like it could be the exact same thing. It's like Trump won, everybody come to me now, even though I don't really give a damn about y'all anyway. How do you see this?
First of all, I remember when Mr. Trump said some really ugly things about Mika. She was bleeding from wherever and, just really distasteful things. I don't see how she, with a straight face, could have, and pulling her daddy in there was like lowball. But I don't see how, with a straight face, after someone has denigrated her that way, to go and talk with him, and her husband also going to talk to him. But you know what, what Joy said was correct. People are trying to make sure that they're not cut out of the access. This is predatory capitalism at its best. What do I mean by that? These people want to make sure they're on MSNBC. They don't want to they want to keep their sponsors. They want to keep their access. They're Washington insiders. They still want to be Washington insiders. Don't be surprised if you don't see them turning up at the White House for some party or some event or something like that, because that's what's going to happen. Basically, they are, Reva Martin's husband has a word for it, and I forgot it. I was thinking about it when she was talking. But anyway, it's just about basically, for a better word, star effing. But there's a better word. He had a much better word. Ernest Martin. But anyway, the bottom line is they're scurrying for favor. They don't want to be left out. Scarborough has always been kind of more of a centrist. He's not a progressive. Mika a little bit more so. But that's not the point. The point is that what you're seeing is a lot of scrambling. I'll call him 47 because I don't want to call his name. We used to call him 45. Reverend Barbara and I used to call him 45, but 47 has said he's going to get revenge. He's going to get revenge. I got a call from a colleague after we did the State of the Black World Conference here in D.C. on Thursday last week. A brilliant job by Dr. Ron Daniels. And I said, of course, what I always say, with a little economic splice in there. And this sister called me and she says, and she's a Republican. She said, you need to be careful. I said, what? She said, they're watching all y'all. You need to be careful. I said, so what would you have me do? She said, I'm your friend. She was actually, I think she was on the Delta line before mine or after, I don't remember. But she's like, they're watching y'all. And I believe that so they're watching us. This is not going to change my ways or my days. But the fact is that he's promised retribution. He's going to get retribution. There are no firewalls between the Congress, the Senate, the court, and him. So given all that, he pretty much can do whatever he wants to do. And if you are pulling down a few mil at MSNBC, and you used to be a congressperson, you were National Security Advisor's daughter, y'all want to stay in the in crowd. And so the way you're going to stay in the in crowd is to kiss behind. And that's what they've been doing. They've been kissing behind. I think it was a horrible, I think just do you, boo. But I don't think it doesn't give me any confidence in them. And I don't know if it gives any other people, their listeners, their viewers, any confidence in them either. Because what they're basically saying, he could talk about me like a dog. He could do this, he could do that. And I'm going to still go to Mar-a-Lago and kiss his behind. So I hope you like the taste of, when you kiss in the behind of someone whose diaper spilled. That's all I have to say.
So, Eljoy, something that you said had me thinking, so many of us are in this kind of, I don't even know how to explain it, this zone where we're so frustrated with the news and so on and so forth. You said that you gave your staff instructions about what they should be doing going forward. So kind of going off of that, what are your instructions in terms of how we should be dealing with situations like this, where we feel like our media networks that some of us may have favored were the face of the resistance or the face of some form of criticism, and they don't seem to do that anymore? We see the Washington Post and the LA Times that decided that they weren't going to endorse a candidate, and people felt like they were falling off as well, and they were acquiescing. What type of advice are you giving to your staff? And in addition to that, what advice would you give for us who are just feeling this sense of hurt by these, what many people are calling betrayals?
Yeah. I think it's important for you to invest your time and your eyeballs into institutions that serve you. And for me, these institutions are entertainment institutions. They are, as Dr. Malveaux said, they are part of the system of predatory capitalism. They are trying to maintain eyeballs in order to maintain ad revenue, in order to increase shareholder revenue. That's what they're for. And so once you understand that, then you can detach yourself from this personal connection that we seem to have built with some of the folks that are reporting quote unquote news. I remember a time, my grandmother, and watching news with my grandmother, she watched a particular channel because she trusted the news from that particular person that, they were giving her facts, they were giving her the information. If someone breaks that trust, right? So you then develop this personal relationship. You feel like this person is delivering the news directly to Eljoy, right? That they're thinking of you as they are putting their stories together and having this conversation. For me, that has been broken. There is, I'm taking my eyeballs, I'm taking my support to institutions that are going to serve me in one way and giving me the pure facts, and giving me news and not heavy on their opinion. Before you give me opinion, tell me what happened first. And we see a lot we've become accustomed to this cable news piece that we're in, where people are just giving you their opinion on things before they actually give you what happened, what the facts are. And so with that, I'm divesting from those institutions and instead investing in local news, in community news, in, NPR and sort of other places that can give me, and I don't want just an echo chamber. Let me, make sure that people understand that, because I read from 36 different sources every morning for my 2 hours in reading news. I read from 36 different sources, some that are more progressive leaning, some that are more conservative leaning, just to understand what is happening all across the country. And I think we don't have to settle for what is being presented. We can make moves by moving our eyeballs and turning the clicker away from these institutions that are really about, the bottom line and not necessarily about giving us the facts and giving us information so that we can make decisions to support or not support, to protest, to challenge and to engage in our own governance, I would say.
Well, you're talking about shifting those eyeballs, as Reverend Carr says in our commercials. People need to bring their eyeballs home. And it's going to be sad to see so many of these other networks and individuals just acquiesce in advance. But you all know here on the Black Star Network, we're going to keep it real. And so we hope that those eyeballs continue to grow with us as well. As Roland Martin said last week, he started with like 1,500 subscribers or something and reached 1.5 million last week. And we're approaching 2 million. So that's our goal right now. So we hope that many people will follow Joy's advice and bring those eyeballs right over here to the Black Star Network as well. And we're going to be keeping an eye on what's happening at SNBC as well.
It's great and important advice for any. I would also advise people to look at international news, to look at The Guardian, to go to allafrica.com. I mean, one of the biggest challenges I find is that we have this tunnel vision about the United States, like we're the only place in the world. And we start looking at Africa news, South American news, I think it's really important there. I find, I am a CNN junkie, I'll admit it. But lately, I start turning that mess off after 30 minutes in the morning. I do my prayer call, then I pray for the fools. And what has happened in my observation with CNN is that too many of the anchors have too many opinions. In other words, this woman was on last week and somebody brought up the issue, the stupid Republican commercials about trans people. And she said, well, I have 2 little girls and I'm just worried that some boy on a football field. And I'm like, give me a bloody break. That did not belong in the conversation. So we have to not only be discerning, but get out of the United States. Listen, watch BBC, something else, because when other people look at us, they see how flawed we are. We have had this myth of American exceptionalism, and it was a myth, but it held for any number of reasons. But this Trump nonsense makes it clear that there's nothing exceptional about this country. That when they say make America great again, when was it great? When was it great for Black people? When was it great for poor people? People have to be discerning about, I used to say years ago, there's a reason I don't like white people's sitcoms. Because when I open my door and let those fools in my house, if you look at some of this, no, they couldn't come in my house. So why would I watch them on television? And that's beginning to be the way I feel about some of this news. I watch Simone. I love her, love her, love her. I'll watch Abby sometimes. But basically, this is corporate media on steroids.
Absolutely. And I think that at the end of the day, it just really comes down to what both you all are saying. We have to figure out a way to get people to enhance critical thinking. And part of critical thinking is diversifying sources. And this is a great opportunity, as some of us are getting so disappointed with these networks and hosts that we respect on many levels, to start to doing that right now. This is a great time to do that. So both of y'all gave us powerful advice. The Guardian said that, this is their plan to stand up to Trump over these next 4 years. Are some of these journalist outlets going to do that here? We'll wait to see, because we know what we're going to do right here.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free to download, free to use, next generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you help build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on StartEngine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.
Oh, hashtag, we tried to tell you. Donald Trump kept lying that, nothing get Project 2025. He knew nothing about it, didn't want to read it, had no impact on his campaign, yet it's amazing how he keeps hiring people who are all tied to Project 2025. We're seeing this in his cabinet picks. We're seeing this in their policies. And the reality is they are going to implement that 900 plus page leadership guide. We were clear. Journalist and author Ahmed Baba, who wrote what Trump's cabinet and staff picks tell us about his second term priorities, joins us now from Brooklyn. Glad to have you here on the show, Ahmed. Look, it's real clear. They were lying the entire time. And these idiots in the media fell for it. Well, Trump said that wasn't the case. And we're like, Trump lies about lies. So we all knew he was lying. And so he names Brendan Carr to be chair of the Federal Communications Commission. Who is Brendan Carr? He only wrote the section of Project 2025 dealing with the FCC. Okay, we can go down the line. All of these people who he's picking all have tied. His press secretary. Oh no, nothing to Project 2025. She's in their videos, and so it was all a lie, and we knew it. And guess what? A bunch of folks in this country fell for the okie doke, and they effed around, and they're about to find out.
Yeah, they're about to get a really extremist agenda. I mean, we've been calling this out for months. I've been on this for over a year now. And essentially, as we could see the whole time, Project 2025 directly aligned with Donald Trump's agenda. We saw this in the beginning. CBS did an analysis that found 270 proposals directly match Agenda 47. We saw many of his former appointees and administration officials crafted it. Brendan Carr, now literal direct author of the FCC chapter. And he actually got in a Twitter beef with me after I called out his ties. He responded by saying, "I'm so sorry this happened to you." So as we can see, internet trolls.
I'm sorry, you're breaking it right there. He said what to you?
He slid in my replies at 2 a.m. and said, "I'm sorry that happened to you," in response to me calling out his Project 25 ties. It didn't really make any sense. So essentially, we have affirmative action for grifters in Trump's cabinet here. We have internet trolls who are sitting here in my replies and other people's replies, the incoming FCC chair, who has promised and indicated that he would target the broadcast licenses of networks that Trump disagrees with. He spoke about NBC. Today, he was on Fox News talking about CBS. So we have not just Brendan Carr, but we have Matt Gaetz, who would implement retribution. Project 2025 calls for, this is something for your black audience, for us black folks to care about, turning the Civil Rights Division on its head to target and essentially take universities or people who are trying to boost diversity, accuse them of discrimination, right? So there's all of these avenues that these cabinets indicate Project 2025 plan will be implemented successfully. And not only that, as we personnel policy, that's how the saying goes. Donald Trump has successfully won, unfortunately, and I think Americans are about to be really shocked by the extremist agenda that he implements. I think a lot of people, if they really did vote for inflation, they're not going to get price cuts here. They're going to get a really extremist agenda, mass deportations, Project 2025 agenda that we all said was his. Obviously, it's not directly his, but Agenda 47 echoed the bulk of it. And we're about to get this full force rolling.
Well, first and foremost, I laugh at these fools in the case. And Brendan Carr knows better when he's talking about, we're going to go up to CBS, let's say go after NBC because they had Vice President Kamala Harris on Saturday Night Live. First of all, go to my iPad. These are the CBS owned and operated stations. For all of y'all out there who don't understand how the FCC works, the FCC only has jurisdiction over stations with broadcast licenses. Let me be clear. CBS has affiliates. These are the only owned and operated stations of CBS. That's it, y'all. The rest of the stations that are CBS affiliates, those are locally owned or they have independent owners. So the only licenses they can go after are these stations. And you gotta have a little bit more than, oh, Vice President Kamala Harris went on Saturday Night Live. So here's the other thing, and I meant to tweet this to Brendan, and I'm gonna tweet it to him. I'm very interested. So Brendan Carr is saying that SNL did not give equal time to Donald Trump because they brought on Vice President Kamala Harris. Okay, is Brendan Carr, and this is where progressives need to be a lot more, to me, guerrilla-minded. Salem Broadcasting. Those are radio stations with licenses. How many times did Donald Trump appear on the radio shows of Hugh Hewitt and others? And why didn't those stations give Vice President Kamala Harris equal time? See, Brendan, if y'all want to play this game, we can play this game. We can go after Sinclair Television and their content as well, because those are FCC licenses. Now, if they want to play that game,
on that.
Sure. Now, again, because he's basing the SNL thing on equal time, okay, we can do the equal time conversation. Let's go.
Yeah, and the thing about Sinclair Broadcasting, they see Brendan Carr as a facilitator to this. You're calling out the hypocrisy perfectly. And unfortunately, at this point, they don't care, right? They don't really, there's no ideological consistency. It's just getting their way. So one of the things he's going to potentially do is roll back more regulations that was preventing Sinclair from having more of a monopoly on local stations. So we could see more disinformation proliferated at the local level. And when it comes to CBS and these other networks, although, like, for example, MSNBC doesn't have a license, but their parent company does run some local broadcasting stations, right? So what we could see is it used more as a threat to kind of push people to toe the line. We've seen a little bit of that in recent days, people trying to curry favor with Trump, trying to change their messaging. So we're seeing the threat be enough to change the tone and tenor of some coverage. So that's what we're seeing on the FCC side. And these other cabinet picks, it's just so absurd. I mean, we had Steve Bannon, we had Matt Walsh, we had people who were openly saying right after he won that Project 2025 along, and it vindicated people like me and you, Roland, who have been out here warning about this for a really long time. And although some of this will get tied up in the courts and, there's various things that he might not be able to do on day one, like, for example, Biden is rolled back or actually implemented a rule to make it harder for Trump to essentially target civil servants. But again, he has executive power. He can roll that back. So we're just going to have to see. The guardrails are going to be tested here once again. I mean, the courts are filled with conservative justices, so it really depends on what court where these various things are going to be presented to, and ultimately whether Chief Justice Roberts is really going to let this tilt into full-blown authoritarianism. But, we're not there yet. It's just going to be one of these things that happens a day at a time, and we just have to stay vigilant and call out these plans and people like Brendan Carr and Matt Gaetz who were appointed.
Well, and look, then the reality is, look, folks, okay, they voted for it, and they're going to get it. And so the 70 million people out there who they're about to whack when it comes to food stamps, when it comes to subsidies, the people out there who are going to get whacked, who are going to get deported, all of these different people. And so, and like I saw one story of a guy was like, oh, yeah, I know I might get deported, but I still love Trump. Okay, love his ass back at home. These folks, see, I love all these people. It reminded me of, again, 2016, when people were like, oh, I voted for Trump, but I hope I don't lose my Affordable Care Act. Well, dumbass, that's who you voted for. So, and I'm telling you right now, okay, if Trump and the Republicans try to come in here and get rid of the Affordable Care Act, it's going to be a bunch of crying white people a bunch of crying, broke white people in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Arkansas, especially white men whose lives were changed because of the Affordable Care Act. But y'all want to play games? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what we're going to see here is overreach, right? Trump thinks he has a mandate on his extremist agenda, but as we see, Roland, me and you, we know all these plans, but the average American, a lot of them are tuned out. They don't know the exact details of what Donald Trump is about to pursue. They think, tough guy, economy, lower prices. That's maybe what they thought when they went in the voting booth. But tariffs and a lot of these policies are going to hit, like you said, some of these vulnerable people in red states that Trump considers his base. And by then it's too late. We've elected the guy. And I think one of the silver linings, which is unfortunate because a lot of people are going to get really hurt by this, especially migrants. And I think as Trump overreaches, I mean, we look today, Mike Johnson and their new they're thinking about putting a rule in to prevent the new transgender member of Congress from using, a woman's bathroom. They're focused on these extremist issues that is going to backfire, right? Like Trump can't cancel the midterms as much as we've called him an authoritarian, but he's still in the wannabe stage, right? It takes time. It takes chipping away. With this extremist agenda being implemented, I suspect it's going to backfire heavily. Like I really think when people start to struggle because he went all in on his agenda when he thought that he was he really is misinterpreting this as a broad mandate of all of MAGA extremism. And I think this could cost them the midterms. And then hopefully we begin to, we have that legislative check. And then going into 2028, we can have some kind of figure in here because he can't run again. I mean, he might try, but constitutionally, I'm not on the whole Trump third term vibe. I really think that this is going to be a hard 4 years. And if everybody locks in, we all are staying committed to spreading people, I think we can really pull us back from the brink. Maybe I'm just being optimistic. I don't know where you stand on it.
All right, then. Well, we shall certainly see. And again, I keep telling y'all, for all these people who voted for him, all I'm going to play for the next 4 years is Scarface's No Tears. I don't want to hear whining or crying because this is what you chose to do. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me, Roland.
Folks, on my panel, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, former senior advisor for environmental justice at the EPA. Joining us from D.C., Dr. Larry Walker, assistant professor at University of Central Florida. Out of Orlando, Benjamin Dixon, pastor, political commentator out of Atlanta. Glad to have all three of you here. I'm being very serious, Larry. All I'm going to do is play No Tears. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear any whining, complaining, crying. Someone was saying that the number of searches on Google, can I change my vote? I'm sorry. You had 8 years. You saw what happened in matter of fact, you go back further. Okay, you go to 2015, 9 years. You go to 2011. They knew exactly who this man was. They decided, they willingly accepted evil. Now they're going to have to accept it. Now they got to accept that Dr. Oz being over Medicare, Medicaid, okay, even though he paid a massive ICE fine, okay? Matt Gaetz sleeping with 17-year-olds, the women testifying that they actually saw that happen. Please, don't look, I'm telling you, I'm going to get a shirt that says, don't blame me, I voted for the black woman.
That's real talk, Roland. And so the next 4 years are going to be like if a farmer decided he was going to let a fox inside the hen house and then close the door and say he's not responsible. What happens to the hens? So that's essentially what our next 4 years are going to look like. And so, Roland, you're right. Black folks in particular have consistently, not just the last 4 years, so the last 8+ years, warned about what Donald Trump his first administration, now the second administration will look like. So you talked about the Affordable Care Act. We saw the attacks against the Department of Education and all the other damage that could be done to Homeland Security, state, in terms of international issues. We could go on and on. And listen, Roland, I worked on the Hill, and essentially what the Republicans have done is we're going to do in the second Donald Trump term is every single thing they had ever hoped to do when it comes to dismantling the federal government as a state is exactly what's going to happen. Going after federal workers in terms of how, the post office, all these other things that people take for granted. And, in terms of Americans don't know what it's like to live without, are going to find out what it's like to live out with these essential services. And so you talked about the Affordable Care Act, Roland, and how, some folks don't understand that the Affordable Care Act is Obamacare. And so why they say they don't like Obamacare, they have the Affordable Care Act. And so why this, it seems silly that people don't understand those differences. They fell for the banana in the tailpipe. And you're right. There are millions of people who are going to lose their health insurance. Parents who have their, were able to keep kids on their insurance until 26. Let's not talk about pre-existing conditions in terms of individuals we all love about who have had previous health challenges. Their ability to get new insurance or keep their insurance will be made virtually impossible. And then once again, this is the dismantling of the federal government as a state, and we will all pay for it.
I really, Mustafa, it will be difficult, yes, but for a lot of these people, I really don't want to hear a lot. I don't. It's not like, again, it's not like they didn't know. It's not like they didn't know the kind of things that he said. They didn't know about his behavior. All of these things were there. They were covered. It was public. It was all there. They simply said, oh no, eggs are too high, even though eggs went down. Gas is too high, even though gas went down. Oh, the economy is awful. Okay, they said, we're going to ignore how he responded to COVID because we're going to only focus on those 2 other great years. Okay, good luck.
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier, and it's amazing. I don't think most folks get that they're literally going to be paying for incompetence and extremism. So they're going to use your tax dollars to actually implement many of these things that are going to put your life in a much more difficult position. For some folks, it will shorten your life. For others, it will take your life. And, there's a responsibility normally for individuals who take these types of positions. One, you're supposed to be one of the best. If you're going to lead, whether it is HUD or EPA or HHS or a number of different places. The other part is that you are supposed to care about the community and you're supposed to take civil servants seriously in this space. But now you're going to have folks who, whether you believe in wanting to have clean air or clean water, that is going to become much more difficult. When we look at, as Brother Larry just talked about, around healthcare, for those of us who have been fighting for criminal justice reform, we now know that that's going to be much more difficult. For voting rights, all these different types of things, you are literally paying for these things to be dismantled and deconstructed. So I hope you get what you had hoped for, because, now you're paying for it in so many different ways in both your health and the future of your children, and in relationship to your positioning inside of this society.
Ben.
One of my concerns, Roland, is the power of MAGA, the misinformation machine, to turn the minds of these people. I've seen people in person who literally embrace the destruction. They embraced the destruction of COVID. One guy came and said that he felt it was his patriotic duty to get sick with COVID, right? And the ability to manipulate the minds of the masses at that level really suggests to me that even after they go through the stage of destruction, they'll still be turning back to Donald Trump, thanking him for punishing them and thanking them for destroying their lives. And so it's a really sickening deception that is over this entire country that honestly, we have to be delivered from, because it's going to impact us as much as I want to poke in the eyes of other people. And I'm doing my best. I want that T-shirt that you're going to get. Don't blame me. I voted for the black woman, right? I want that T-shirt, but I do know that when they start rolling back water regulations, that it's going to impact our water supply. When they affect the EPA, it's going to affect everyone's air that we breathe. So it's really going to have a deleterious effect on every single one of us. But there's going to be a subset of folks who turn around and thank their dear leader, Donald Trump, for making their life miserable.
Oh, absolutely. And again, had a whole campaign, and folks chose to do differently. So any of those people who go, oh my God, I regret my vote, we tried to tell you.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free to download, free to use, next generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you help build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on StartEngine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.
Now, Shabuzi, black country music star, he was nominated for got the biggest song of the year. He was nominated for New Artist of the Year. He was also nominated so he was nominated for New Artist of the Year, Single of the Year, but he came up empty. Now, his was interesting. This guy named Trent Wilmot, who was the producer for Cody Johnson. Cody Johnson won Album of the Year. This is literally what dude says on the stage last night.
It takes an army of people to make a great record, but I got to tell you, this is for this cowboy who's been kicking Shabuzi for a lot of years, y'all, Cody Johnson.
Well, Shabuzi did not take kindly to that. He posted this photo on Instagram and Twitter as well, making it perfectly clear how he felt, like nobody is kicking me around. This is a guy who has broken the record he's had for 18 non-consecutive weeks, has been #1 on the Billboard's Hot 100, okay? He's 1 week away from setting a new record, okay? He performed in the ceremony as well. And it was, of course, again, he's a huge breakout star. Of course, there were a lot of people who were highly critical of the CMAs because Beyonce, of course, big hit, and she got no CMA nominations as well. You also might remember when she performed during the CMAs. When she performed, she actually, huge ratings, but a lot of those racist folks did not like the fact that she performed, and they were ripping her online. They took that video down and eventually put it back up. It's got to be insane, Joy, to have a record-breaking year where you come on the scene and you take it by storm, and you have the hottest record, and you don't even win New Artist of the Year. Who the hell?
I mean, look, this is racism in America. They have decided that we are not going to take country music again by storm, even though they came from us, right? That's why we have country music, is because of Black people, right? So they're not going to have it. They're not going to allow it. And they're going to diminish our artists. But the truth is, and they know it too, they can't diminish our artists because their own viewers are listening to our artists. And they're crossover, and they're taking the country music by storm. There is nothing they can do about it. The only thing they can do is try to deny them some award, frankly, some silly award that at this point is continuing to make itself less and less relevant because it doesn't reflect what is obviously happening here. It also means that we're going to have to diversify who's making a decision about who wins what awards and who doesn't win the awards. None of this is a surprise. Shabuzi, Beyonce, they're not grieving. They're just fine. I love that big smile he had.
The song is a bar song, Tipsy. And again, the caption of that photo, go ahead and show it again. He said, "Ain't nobody kicking me." And to me, that was the appropriate response, Lauren. And guess what? You may not bring home the awards, but hey, when you racking up the dough, you rack up the money, and there's no doubt that he is indeed a major star. He's also up for 5 Grammy Awards. And so let's see what happens at the Grammys.
Yeah, the Country Music Association is made up of, 6,000 people, which is a relatively small amount of people when we talk about the metrics of music, when you can sell into the millions. And this song is a phenomena. I don't know that Shabuzi is really in need, or Beyonce is in need of this type of white validation, quite frankly, because there's something, as Quincy Jones once said, there's something almost on a religious level about music. And what happens is that popular phenomena of people listening to his music and going to see him in concert would overtake anything that CMA would ever do. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what happened to Spike Lee with the movie Malcolm X, when Son of a Woman won, or actually it was Al Pacino who won the best actor, and Denzel didn't win, and the movie didn't win. And, we look back on it all, like, what movie do we remember? We remember Malcolm X more than we remember Son of a Woman, right? So it's kind of the public speaks, and they'll win out in the end. And I just don't think they are in need of this type of white validation. It really just doesn't matter. They're overtaken by the numbers. They're overtaken by the fame that they'll get from their music. And shout out to Shabuzi. He's got a Virginia connection. He was born in Woodbridge. He's going to overtake them. He's going to win in the end. It's just no doubt in my mind. And Beyonce's already won. She won years ago. It really is kind of cute that they think that they can diminish these people. They're not going to be able to do it.
Well, it's funny, of course, when you look at the numbers, you look at how you perform, you look at, frankly, being number one. And I get a kick out of these people, Derek, who go, this is our culture. It's ours. You didn't even create it.
Right. Because Roland, they do
Black people did. You didn't even create it.
History.
Black people created country music.
They don't know their history, and that's why they're trying to whitewash history, right? They got to go back to Chuck Berry. Who did Chuck Berry have learn from him? Elvis Presley. Ask Elvis Presley who he learned from, right? And so B.B. King, right? We create everything, Roland, and that's why they're so envy and jealous of us. I don't care if it's country music, sports, like football or tennis, anything we get involved in, they cannot compete. And so the little piece that they try to control, this is a perfect example. They try to control it. And so, yeah, I agree with Lauren and Joy. Beyonce and Shabuzi, they're in a great place. They don't have nothing to worry about. And we're going to continue to do as a people, as Black people, continue to demonstrate Black excellence, regardless of the industry, regardless of the activity that we get involved in.
Well, I think it would be absolutely hilarious for Shabuzi to go to the Grammys and clean up big time, and then sit here and go, "Hey, CMA, how you like me now?" And also I love the new generation of Black country stars that are coming up. And here's the deal. Bottom line is, white folks don't own country music. They don't own it. And Lil Nas also showed Shabuzi some love, because remember, they were not happy when his song blew up and took over and dominated the charts as well. And so, to me, that's where you always get the last laugh, when they start talking trash and you go, look at the charts, look at the charts, look at the charts. All right.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free-to-download, free-to-use, next-generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you help build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on StartEngine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.